Good morning to all my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5am Club. You may notice that my voice is a little hoarse today, and the reason for the hoarseness was yesterday was May Day here in Sydney, and I went on a May Day march with the CFMEU, being a union delegate, organised for the whole team to join me and thousands of others to march through the city to protest and strike for better worker rights here in this country, as many other people, millions and millions of other people, do the same thing throughout the world. What I want to do this morning is go through a book summary like I normally do on Jim's 5am Club, and today's book is entitled The Modern Working Woman's Guide to High Energy Happiness. It's a book written by an author named Louise Thompson, who is a life coach, a happiness coach, and is a very, very successful businesswoman in her own right, who writes from experience, having been burnt out like most young professionals from a career of heavy workloads, immense over socializing, and all of the other activities which go with being a young professional in the world today. So in her book, she'll try and identify what makes us happy and what we can do to make adjustments to one's life in order to bring that happiness, allow that happiness to bubble to the surface. The fulfillment of living a life which is yours. The fulfillment of doing the things that make you happy. And what she says in her book is that it is critical to sit down and take account of the things that make you tick, because the bottom line is that each and every one of us is different from each other. We're different from each other in many ways. We're also similar to each other in many ways, but it's the differences from each other that allow us to live a life which is unique and fulfilling, and allows us to gain happiness according to our measure. So what Louise kicks off in her book to talk about is where she says that true happiness comes from learning what makes us tick, spending time inside and being introspective. So this comes at various times for various people. Sometimes we have a life crisis which shakes us to our core and gets us to sit down and think about who we are and what life's all about, or more specifically, what our life is all about. So Louise delves into these topics in her book and gives the reader an opportunity to ask some important and vital questions of their life. And she goes along a line where she mentions that life for all of us, whilst it's different, we're different from each other, we're also different for each other. and well-being for each and every one of us needs to be a holistic exercise which incorporates the mental, the physical, the spiritual, the social, etc. So basically looking at our life wheel, because in order to be happy in one's life, one needs to have goals and to be kicking goals in all the various aspects, all the various quadrants of one's existence. So you can't be fulfilled and happy in one area and depleted in another area, because what will happen is the depletion in one area will cause disharmony, will cause an imbalance, and that imbalance will trigger and stimulate our OCD, and then we'll strive to try and find balance in that area, which makes us feel uncomfortable and leads to unhappiness, according to Louise Thompson. So we all have, as we mentioned before, a different life. We've had a different past. Each and every person will have a different past, will have a different present, a different now. I am here, you're somewhere else, and we're all going to have a different future. And our lives will meander, will drift from place to place. Doesn't matter how organised, how planned we are, how driven we are, life has a way of interrupting and upsetting all of our plans. And what we need to do is to go with the flow in many ways, and to at least get through the rip, get through the things that drag us elsewhere, and get back on course at some point. So the author talks about a holistic approach to happiness, where we basically need to align the mental, the physical, the spiritual, the emotional aspects of our lives. And the goal is to have a thing called effortless well-being, where you don't fight life, you go with it, but you go with it in a productive way and a disciplined way, where you know where you want to end up, but you allow yourself to drift from time to time, and then at the right moment you correct your course, just like a plane when it's flying through the sky going from Sydney to London, for example. Along that path, even though they know exactly where they're going, the plane will be off course throughout that journey. But what the autopilot does, or what the pilot does, is they correct and overcorrect along that journey to take into consideration the headwinds, the crosswinds, the storms up above, and the storms ahead, to make the most of that journey. And that journey will never be entirely a straight line or a direct journey, but it'll be a journey that changes over time, as we mentioned, and as we've probably experienced in our own lives as well. The author here then goes on to talk about the importance of being careful of the environment, the environments that you circulate in, that you socialise in, and to be careful of perfectionism, being or trying to be perfect, or appearing to be perfect, because what that will do is that will mean that in an imperfect world, where we're dealing with people who have varying levels of capability, if you stress and obsess too much about perfection, what the author here says is that it may lead you to creating stress in your own life, and that stress will lead to burnout. And burnout is a condition that a lot of people experience in today's modern world, and hence the purpose of this book is to try and help young people or people who are out there seeking improvement to try and identify what the issues are, because what happens is that with time we learn to be helpless. It's a condition called learned helplessness, where you try and make changes, but the environment that you're living in and the rules that you've set bring you undone, and they keep on kicking you back into where you were before, and you can't break out of those negative, disempowering patterns that you have working against you. So the author here, like many people, suffered chronic fatigue, where she was young, she was once vibrant, she was very, very busy, and yet she lost her zest, she lost her energy, and wasn't able to fulfill the many competing needs on a daily basis, much so that she had to leave her job, her very, very well paid, important job, and was bedridden for 4 months and couldn't work for a year after that. So all of the stresses, all of the strains, all of the challenges that she lived with for a long period of time, maybe a decade or so in her words, all built up on each other and led to her eventual breakdown. And it's something that happens to lots of people. They just wake up one day and they just can't function anymore. So it's chronic fatigue syndrome, as the author says, which is a heightened level of exhaustion. And what it is it's a problem with how our body handles energy. And the doctors that Louise were talking with had coined a term called adrenal fatigue. And what adrenal fatigue is, if I'm not wrong, is when we live in a high stress environment and our bodies, our minds, our emotions, our spirit are constantly stressed and stretched to the limit. We are living with fear, uncertainty and doubt. And what happens is that our minds, our brains, kick into a primitive mode of fight, flight or freeze. And it causes a surge of hormones to be secreted into our bloodstream, adrenaline from our adrenal glands. And if you're constantly in stress and you don't allow your body to relax and to relieve itself of that stress, what happens is that this secretion of adrenaline into your body just causes a tremendous amount of disunity and discomfort, that your body is working against itself, your mind is working against itself, and you're operating on fear. And that in itself damages your health in many ways. So this term adrenal fatigue is basically talking about the fact that if you've got too much adrenaline feeding through your body, and there was once a time where adrenaline was useful. You know, it can be useful in sports when you're playing a grand final and you're in the last minutes of the game, even though you're physically spent. your body can continue to surge hormones into the bloodstream and keep you at your very, very peak. Or in primitive times or previous times, you know, you'd need it to escape a predator, you'd need it to escape an enemy, but those times are no longer with us. Most people are living and working in an office environment, you know, are living in comfortable houses, driving beautiful cars. We don't need to be on edge because there is no danger out there that is life-threatening anymore. And yet we create that fear, uncertainty and doubt in our minds that take us back to those primitive times where we think there's a saber-toothed tiger around the corner about to attack us. So we're going to be careful that we don't have these negative stresses. Now, there are two types of stress. There's eustress, which is a positive stress, which gets us doing things and operating in a particular way. But there's also negative stress, which creates those negative hormones, which wear our bodies down, wear our organs down. So too much adrenaline in our system makes us too stressed, and being too stressed makes us unhealthy, is what the author was saying. And what happens in some people is that it pushes them to find substitutes to help them deal with the stresses that they have. Substances such as alcohol, nicotine, sugar, fat, drugs, etc. are an artificial way of covering up an issue which they have, which impacts them. So the author then goes on to say that if you're constantly working at using up your energy for false purposes, you know, when you're in fear, when you're frozen, and when you're basically fighting shadows, what the author is saying here is that using that energy unwisely is something that can be negative to your body. And if you've got no energy left, nothing will work in your life, because at the end of the day, the most important thing that we have in our lives is energy, and the energy is our currency, especially in this modern world where we're under pressure to perform all the time, and it's the most undervalued currency of our modern life. So the author talks about 4 elements that we need to manage and deal with. The 4 elements that need to be aligned are a strong body, a fierce mind, a kind heart, and a brave spirit. So it's basically looking at the wheel, our life wheel, and making sure that we have energy in our physical life, in our mental life, emotional life, and spiritual life, which is aligned. So one of the key messages, one of the key calls to action from this author is where we're asked to prioritise, where possible, where we spend and where we invest our energy, to make sure that we sleep, we eat, we think, we do, we plan, and we share in ways that are going to give us the biggest bang for our buck. We are called to self-regulate, to take control, not to fight, but to shape our destiny with how we use our energy. Because the more energy we have, the happier, according to this author, we will be. I remember years ago reading that age is not a number. Your age is not a number, but an energy level. Now, you can be 30 years of age and have the energy level of an 80-year-old. Or you can be 60 or 70 and have the energy level of a 30-year-old. So it's up to you to manage and monitor your energy levels, to make the most of your life, and to have the energy ready and available at a time where you can get the biggest buck from it. And it's important that when you're in relationships, when you've got children, when you've got family members around you, to train them as well to manage their energy levels, so they're not wasting their energy on unproductive tasks, unproductive emotions, unproductive thoughts, and all of the other things that go with it, so that they don't drain you and you don't drain them, so that you work together to manage your energy collective, so that as a team you have the energy, or you use the energy, or you invest the energy at the time which gives the greatest return on your investment. So thank you very much for joining me on this morning episode of Jim's 5 a.m. Club. It's Tuesday morning. It looks like it's going to be another absolute cracker of a sunrise. I wish I could be on the east coast down by Bondi or Bronte to capture today's sunrise. It looks like there's not a cloud in the sky, and autumn in Sydney, autumn in Australia is by far the best period, the best season of the year, as we have the bluest skies, the clearest mornings, the most magnificent sunrises. And I look forward to one day when I am retired to try and make the most of this time of year by being by the beach early in the morning, and hopefully continuing along the line of Jim's 5 a.m. Club, where I can be bringing you other book summaries where we take OPE, other people's experiences, and incorporate the learnings into our lives so that we can live a better life, be an example to others, to help them make the most of the opportunities that are available to us on a daily, weekly and monthly basis. Yassas, take care, and we'll chat again. Bye for now.